Welcome to this evening's discussion about creation of solo shows. And as you can see, we have this amazing group of panelists, and I'm going to allow themselves to introduce themselves and to just briefly talk a little about their work. And then I have been given a number of questions to ask, and at the end of our time, I have been given some audience questions that will open up to the house. So, Dale.
Hi, I'm Dale Orlando Smith. I just finished a show called Forever. I've written quite a few solo pieces. I'm best known for a piece called Yellow Man that was done some years ago, and thanks for coming here to hear what we all have to say.
Hi, I'm Nalaja's son. I am most known for a solo piece I did called No Child, and I'm writing my next solo piece that will be at the Henry Street Settlement in 2 months. A little plug there, huh?
There you go.
Nicely played. Hi, my name is Mo Angelos, and I did a solo piece a couple of years ago at New York Theater Workshop called Sontag Reborn, which was based on the early journals of the writer and activist Susan Sontag. And yeah, that's me.
Danny Hock. I did a bunch of solo shows over many years. And it was exhausting.
And I should probably say that I'm Jo Bonney, and I have worked on a number of solo pieces, both with Danny and with Dale, and with someone else called Eric Bogosian. So I'm going to ask just a general question and put it out to the panelists. And the first question is really just what inspires you to actually make solo work, and where do you start in your creative process? Don't rush to answer.
Okay. It's funny because I didn't set out per se to be a solo actor. I mean, it's because I think everybody up here were just actors who happen to do solo work. And I think ideas come. Part of the reason why I began to write the stuff, when I began to write, it was because the roles just weren't there. I grew up, as a young woman in the 70s and the 80s, and that was the era of the black musical, like Sophisticated Ladies and all of that kind of stuff. And with the exception of For Colored Girls, there really wasn't anything. And if one were to audition, it'd all be prostitutes and junkies. How many ways can you say ho? There's not too many ways you can say that. So I began to write, so I could have something to do, because the roles really, in fact, weren't there. So that's when I began to do that, And I think it's just as a solo actor, a lot of times just ideas, I think ideas just come. And it just happens to, and then I also write multi-character work as well, so I really don't think in terms of genres that way, but for some strange reason, the solo stuff is the one that has become preeminent, so.
Yeah. I would echo that. I trained as an actor, and when I started to go out on auditions, for some reason, there were acting teachers when I was in training that put this altruistic idea in my head of what theater should be, that it was this sacred experience, that it was educational and it should be cathartic and moving and inspirational and make you think and challenge you. And the things that were out there to audition for were the opposite of that. So, and I was very young and I was like, fuck that. So I started to, I think, just create what I wanted to act in. And I didn't really think about collaborating with anybody or even think that I could write because I didn't study writing. And you start creating things, and ultimately, if you're one person, I guess ultimately it leads to creating characters, and then all of a sudden you're like hopping around on a stage, and here we are.
Yeah, I think if I think about the first time I did my first solo piece, it was in college, and I went to a predominantly white college, but I came from the Lower East Side, so many of my characters looked like what the Lower East Side used to look like back in the late 70s and 80s. So I had just so many different races and sexualities, and then I went to Franklin and Marshall College, which looks nothing like the Lower East Side, and what I found was that I wrote my first play when I was a senior, but no one could do my play because no one was like black or Latino, and so I said, I'll just do my own play, and I'll direct my own play, which was absurd. Don't do it unless you're, I don't know, just, unless you're insane, or maybe do it and see how what directors really do for your solo piece. But what I wound up finding out was that I could, if I wanted to, be anyone. And just like you were saying, as a black actor, you can't be anyone on TV. You can't be anyone in the theater, but you can actually be anyone in your solo piece. So it's really the best.
My story is similar, except I have late onset solo performance. So I have had the very good fortune of working with a couple of amazing ensembles in New York City, the Five Lesbian Brothers and the Builders Association, and I've collaborated with those companies for many, many years. And then I read the journals, the published journals of Susan Sontag, and I was very captivated by them. So my motivation in this particular instance was just that material, which really resonated in many ways for me. I was really fascinated by the idea of trying to stage this woman's mind, her incredible mind. So yeah, that's how I got there. Because I am terrified of being on stage by myself. I do not know how you people do this all the time. Like, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. So, yeah.
So that actually sets up an interesting jumping off point for ways of approaching solo work. I don't know. I imagine that everyone is pretty much an actor here. Maybe writers, embryonic writers, but how the piece is put together tends to have a different impulse. So Mo, you're talking in this case that it's actually coming from finding a text that you wanted to adapt and put into create as a theater piece, and then everyone else is talking about coming from primarily being an actor. Is that true? Or coming from the written word? I mean, there's different, because my experience, I know, Danny, early on, is that you came at it in terms of characters that you didn't even write down initially. You created a whole world, and then it was only you wrote them down sometimes,
I wrote them down because you forced me to write them down.
It's true. But it actually,
Thank you.
So, but what is wonderful is all these scripts then end up actually creating a master work then that other actors then can perform. And I know that a lot of this work is done all around the world now by other actors. Nilaja was just saying that her work is actually being taught in the curriculum in Australian schools at the moment, and that all these kids came to see the work and then and spoke with her after. But I know that everyone's work here is done by other actors, so that's coming from a different angle, a text angle, and from an acting angle, creating characters. Can you all address that a little? I know that was a very rambling question, but in there somewhere is a question, I'm sure.
What are we addressing?
I think where does
the
it
originating
come from?
impulse?
Yeah, the originating impulse.
Because it seems
the
that
source.
Exactly, because Mo is talking actually about coming from text, but my understanding is that a lot of your work also, the others, come from characters or stories that you want to tell, but you're not adapting existing text, right?
Well, a lot of times, I mean, I read voraciously, and a lot of times ideas come from what I read. I also listen to a lot of music. So because music is very, very, I'm very connected to rock and roll specifically. So my ideas will come out of it because I can think of a character. Or we listen. The way I try to write like a musician. So often an idea will come literally from like a sound. So there's this whole thing that goes on, you know, that, or something that I've read. I mean, there's a piece that I want to write for somebody now about a one-hander, about a black classical musician from the 18th century. I'm writing a piece for someone.
And so you mean that when you're listening to the music, it translates into the rhythm of the language?
Rhythm of the language, and also a character. Sometimes I'll see I mean, it'll come to me. A character will come to me as if I'm listening sometimes to a piece of music. It creates a sort of mood. It creates a sort of a character can literally come out of music. Chakra, whatever one wants to call that, right? Yeah.
New York City, the lines that you hear on the street alone, I sit in wonderment listening to people constantly, and then when I hear something great, I repeat it again and again and again until I could write it down. The accents, the energy from which that sentence came from, the face. I mean, there's so much inspiration just walking down these streets, and I find that I actually feel the energy in my body. So if I'm walking down the street and I hear something, I'm like, oh my God, that's so good. Oh my God, that's so good. And so I'm waiting to write it down. Oh my God. And that's really where it comes from. Talk about chakras. It must come from like my first chakra, but it's usually a gut feeling. Yeah. And if anything is like makes me weep, I really kind of have to investigate it within myself and my soul. What is making me weep about this? And sometimes that can, I can create a character or even a whole play from that.
Yeah, I don't think it's rocket science around the question. I mean, it's really the world around me, which is no really different than what my acting teachers told me to do as an actor in the first place, which was, you know, be a sponge and absorb everything around you and use that in your craft. But I think once you start thinking outside the box that you're just going to be an actor in somebody else's writing, then you apply that sponge and then reflection back in a different way other than just the role that you've been given. You create the role based on sponging up and then wringing out.
Do you find, all of you, that the process, I mean, there is the process of creating the work initially in terms of all these originating impulses, but then the audience is so much a part of solo work because you actually obviously don't have scene partners. In a way, your scene partner is the audience. Can you talk a little about that, what that is for you, how you use that, how it's productive or how it's actually sometimes problematic? I don't know all the ways that you actually deal with the fact that your relationship is primarily with the audience rather than a scene partner who can buffer you from that.
I could talk about this for years, but I don't want to. Okay, how am I concise? So I always, I think there's more of a connection between the solo performer and the audience because you're just one person, but there's also a disconnect because the expectation of your average audience when you see one person on stage is based upon a series of archetypal solo performers, which include the following: stand-up comedian, preacher, politician, magician, or singer, or clown even. And that can be good, but 99% of the time it's not. Because depending on what you're trying to get across, they just think you're a comedian, or they just think you're a politician, or they just think you're a preacher. And if you can kind of ride the line of all of those archetypes in the performance, then I think you have a successful performance. But sometimes if you ride the line between those archetypes, the audience rejects that because they only want to accept the one archetype or the one lens through which they're seeing you. So any serious stuff is unacceptable because this guy's a comedian. or any political stuff is unacceptable because this guy's a magician, or he's a preacher, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it complicates things, I think, because of that history of the solo performer and our relationship with solo performers.
I also tend to think that sometimes people, you know, in America, we're young aesthetically. And there's this attitude about, I throw my money down, you entertain me. And it's more than that. I mean, because also the audience has to go on a ride. I mean, theater has a problem because it has to be more diversified, age-wise, race-wise. The average theater goer in terms of nonprofit theater is 70-some-odd years old. So when I was doing the Forever piece, right, I would walk out, and I'm not being funny because I'm not a young person myself, so I can say this, right? When I walked out in the first row, already they were asleep. That's part of it, right? And then you've got someone literally who was snoring, and then the person next to them is nudging them. And the fact that someone has to say, turn off your cell phones, unwrap your candy, that within itself isn't something that one should have to say. When one person is on stage, you also have to become the participant to a certain degree. So it's not just a matter of, you know, let me entertain you. There's different kinds of actors. I mean, again, everyone up here, in fact, is an actor. So you have one person doing beginning, middle, end, story, conflict, resolution. And your responsibility, and I say this also as an audience member, is to pay attention to that person. Just because you throw your money down doesn't mean that everything goes.
I think, too, it depends on the nature of the piece. Like, is there direct address in the piece? Like, are you saying, hey, you out there? Or are you, you know, in the special place where you all can't see us here, right? Like, that conceit of a fourth wall. So that, I mean, in the Sontag piece was very containerized almost. You know, I was behind a scrim. Yeah. So I was behind a piece of scrim the whole time, which made a frame. So I was in a frame, like, literally, besides the frame of the proscenium and the frame of the theater. So all those things, I think, cue the audience, like, how am I supposed to engage with this? Right. And it can go badly sometimes, certainly, but.
Did you choose the framing device because you felt that the text, I mean, what was it in the text that gave you that direction, as opposed to, let's say, you know, you're talking about somene's mind that could be direct addressing a house. Why did you make that choice? And how did you
I can't take credit for that choice. That was, you know, Marianne Weems, the director, and Austin Schweitzer, the video designer, because there's a lot of video in the piece, right? So I'm behind the scrim, and there's front project on the scrim, but you can still see through to me, right? So it was technological a lot,
right.
To have this image in front of the live image, which was interesting, because a lot of it is about memory and about about writing, the act of writing, and written language, you know, so there's words cascading, as well as image, you know, so.
Right, so it was a whole concept that you created with your director in terms of, how to present that material.
Exactly.
Right.
You know, when I've done No Child over 800 times, so I've seen my fair share of audiences. And what I learned from one theater just north of here, I learned how to not judge my audience. Yeah, it was in 2010, I'll always remember. And what was happening was that I was performing for an audience that had never seen, No Child is about young teenagers learning how to learning how to act in a play. Basically, that's not a really great description of it, but it's a lot of teenage energy. And my audience in that particular theater, they were not teenagers. They did not look like any of the characters who were on stage. And what was happening was that I would look out into the audience and just see this. And this particular show, I have a lot, because there are about 17 different characters. There's an old man, and then there are little young girls. I had a lot of vocal work to do, and what I was finding was because everyone was like this, I was starting to cry within the show, yeah. And I was pushing my voice. And that was the one time that I got laryngitis. And what was happening was that every single night I would call my mom, and Pop was like, I can't do this, I can't do this. And my pop would say, these are the people who you need to speak to. These are really the people. But the way I overcame this so that I could reach the one person who wasn't like this.
Yeah.
Was I had to learn not to judge my audience. And what that meant was I had to really think to myself, okay, some people do look like this, and they love it. Some people have had a ticket to your show for 6 months, and they're dying of cancer. And they're sitting there, and God bless them, they might be asleep, but it doesn't mean that they're not hearing you, and they're not like feeling it within their soul. Some people are like, oh, and they're not getting a damn thing, really. So it's made me a better actor and kind of like a better person, just because I'm not sitting there judging this, what they call resting bitch face. That's a resting bitch face. I don't sit, I did a play with a bunch of actors, and they were like, this person, that person. I said, listen, you have no idea what's going on in other people's lives. And how they listen, how folks listen. So it's made me a better person.
And well, you know, that's very interesting because that relationship with the audience is so intense. But is it also, I mean, because I imagine you're here because you find it interesting, the idea of creating solo work. I don't know whether you're interested in it abstractly or personally in terms of making it for yourself. But it seems to me that to make art in general, you have to have a very compelling reason. And so I guess my big question is always, what is that compelling reason? It doesn't matter what genre it is, or whether it's direct address, or whether you're, framing, using a framing device or whatever, where you're coming from. But essentially, why do you do it? I mean, why are you interested in making solo work? It's just, what is it that, and Danny's looking at me cynically like, yeah, well, that's the point.
Well, it's the cash and prizes, Joe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the exact thing. There are no great, the money is not pouring into this particular, and...
She did her show 800 times.
Right.
And I got $800 for it.
Right.
Oh, my agent would be very mad if she heard that now.
Is there a reason to make solo work in general?
I feel like the impetus is really a combination of the impetus of the playwright as well as the impetus of the actor. So I just taught a course last year on solo performance to some university students, and one of the things that we were talking about was how there's a lot of actors who want to make a solo show because the impetus is they can showcase their talents and get discovered. Take that as you will. Then there's a bunch of folks who make solo shows to work out issues that you have, and this is the way of working out these issues. There's also folks where the impetus is you have a bunch of things on your mind that you feel that need to be out there that aren't out there, and nobody's saying it, so you feel like you're the one that should say it. And some people do it for a combination of those reasons and even more reasons. But I think at the end of the day, what the challenge is, which I discovered over the years, is that even though you're one person on stage, you're still responsible for a play. No matter what the structure of the work is, you're still responsible for the elements of drama and pathos and catharsis and challenge and comedy, tragedy, et cetera, et cetera. And that's difficult. So what I told the students ultimately was like, you know, before you go to do this, ask yourself why you're doing this, because it'll make a better play at the end of the day. Yeah, I'm sure I left some things out, but.
I think it's true. I mean, it's solo work. They're plays.
Yeah.
And it's the same approach as writing a play. It doesn't matter whether it's one person, one actor on stage, or an ensemble of 20. The basic dynamics are the same.
But I also think people lose sight of that, because I mean, a lot of the times, even if it's not directly quote unquote autobiographical, I mean, a lot of the times, whether it be a multi-character play or a single character play, it gives you insight as to how someone feels. But what's happened with the one-person genre, it's been turned into a confessional. And again, everybody in this room has an interesting story, but it doesn't mean that it's a piece of theater. And it's about language, and it's about imagination. Like the last piece that I did, Forever, in fact, is a memoir piece. But if my mother were here, she'd have a totally different take on what happened. And I also have to see the character based on myself. And hear what I'm saying. The character based on myself, because that is a character. They got therapy for the other shit, That's what they got therapists for. But when someone gets up and they talk about, I want to put my life on stage because it's great. What about language? What about imagination? What about character work that he was talking about? Where do these people come from? And even it's about yourself, say. You have to see yourself as a character. Like I teach writing for solo performance, and what I often ask people to do, I'll say, okay, they'll talk about my mother did this, my mother did that, my father did this, and he was horrible. And I'll say to somebody, write a monologue in your father's voice when he was 8 years old and frightened. Because guess what? He was an 8-year-old frightened person. He's not just your father. And I want you to write a monologue and when you were about 12 or 13 and you hurt someone and you were jealous. What do you mean? What do you mean, what do I mean? I have a fair command of the English language. You fucking heard what I said. So, and that's what I mean in terms of being self-honest and being honest with the characters as well and seeing yourself as a character. Yeah?
So just tag it along. Something that was interesting in this course that I taught was that I gave them an assignment to create a character, and I was very clear. The first thing I said is the character cannot be you, and it should be a composite of several real people. People you see on TV, people in your building, people in your family. Everybody's monologue, they were working out their own stuff, and it was them. And I was like, I mean, you can see who was going through relationship problems and who was abused, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, whoa, I got to pull this back. But then I realized that that's really the first impetus, which is interesting. It says a lot about, how you approach that, either as the actor and or the writer.
And you also have to be pretty careful about writing pieces about your family, because if that sucker becomes successful and you want to license it out, someone's going to play your mama. And you're going to sit and you're going to watch it and you're going to be, that's not my mama. So you really do. I try to steer away from familiar. Maybe when I'm older I will, but it's very sensitive. Also, I remember once actually I did a piece where actually my father had to record some of his voice, and my father he's my step-pop and he's Italian from Brooklyn, so he kind of talks like this, right? And everyone's like, that's not your father. That's not your father. So all of a sudden now you're on the defense about your own peace and your own truth and your own family. I can imagine that's what you felt when you did a memoir. You just all of a sudden folks are looking at your family for the first time. Strangers.
In a weird sort of way and even though you say it's a memoir, because again, it's a Tuesday, no, it's a Thursday. Think about like when you've had an argument with someone, right? It didn't happen Tuesday. Yes, it did, because on Tuesday we do so-and-so. No, it was Thursday. And that's what I mean, the memoir. In both of you, there's grains of truth within both of them. Also as you were talking, something hit me. One thing I cannot stand is when someone takes solo pieces and they make them into multi-character pieces, because that totally changes what it's about. Now, why is that?
A hush among the crowd.
Yeah. That's something that I hate as well.
All right, and on that note, I'm going to ask you. So some solo pieces are multi-character pieces. Let's say that the drama is driven by multi-characters. And some pieces more specifically one character. As actors, you have the responsibility of carrying this character or many characters through the whole piece, shape-shifting or finding all the moments of this one character. How rigorous and how important is that to you in terms of your responsibility, I guess, to these characters? Because it's whether it's you can talk about it as a multi-character show, but as in any play, there are characters. It's just that you, as the actors, have the responsibility for all of them. What is your process, I guess, in terms of that responsibility?
Well, there are two pieces where this happened. There's a piece I did years ago called The Gimmick. And what happens with that, we are looking at these other characters through this person's eyes. So how does this person within this play see the people that's around her? So when it was made multi-character, it totally takes away from that person's perspective, this child looking at what's going on around her, doing this, So the other characters are coming in, and it turns into caricature. And the piece, that same thing, I found out that someone messed around with my play Yellow Man, which is a two-hander where both these kids play other people. Looking at these kids are looking at adults and talking about adults, and we see how the way they see the adults through their eyes. So someone turned around and made that into a multi-character thing, and I had to make a change with DPS, and it totally changed what the piece was about. I think certain one-handers can in fact do that, but I'm just saying in my individual case, it's not something that can happen because there's such an emphasis on that individual or those two individuals and how they ingest the world.
So essentially, you have a narrator, and through the narrator, all the other characters manifested.
Of sorts, yeah, totally.
And how does that? That's a
again, the terror of I have to hold this stage by my little self for this amount of time, and so I have incredible respect for everyone on this stage with me because they can all do it and beautifully. So I take it very seriously that I have to, it's okay, people, we're going on the ride, and start at one point and really go to each one of those points. And to do that alone, it's a lot of responsibility. It requires a kind of virtuosic rigor, I would say, in one's performance, It's not like being in a play where there's that moment where the other people are talking and I'm just going to sit on the couch. You don't get to just sit on the couch. Or if you're sitting on the couch, it's very important and you're talking about it. So it requires a kind of concentration that surpasses, I think, when I'm in a play with other people. So yeah. Total
I
respect.
feel like a monk. I know when I'm performing, all of my family, all my friends know that I can't. I just can't. I'm just living for this show. I'm living for, it's odd to say, but I'm living for the audience. Vocally, physically, emotionally. I can't have long emotional conversations on the phone. That's not gonna happen. I live very cleanly. I eat really cleanly. And because I know that I want the folks on Sunday matinee to see what the folks on Tuesday night saw. I want to be the same. So that means that I have to just, when I wake up in the morning, just like you all, when you wake up in the morning, you know that you've got a show to do. It's not like, oh, that's right, 5 o'clock. Oh, I guess I'll do it. You know, I'm thinking about it, and that also means not necessarily hanging out after a show, because I have to think about tomorrow's audience. So there's not a lot of screaming, not a lot of milk drinking. I know that's weird, like dairy, and there's just, I am so good to myself when I am performing. My goodness, I eat healthy, I'm exercising, and then it all goes to pot afterwards.
You know, I just, from personal experience, watching artists doing solo work, I don't think I see anyone as rigorous in their work habits as someone doing a solo piece. I mean, actors work, you know, in ensembles, and so the same actors who are doing solo work are also working in ensemble pieces. But my experience of watching people engage in a solo show is that it's like running a marathon.
Yeah. Yes,
It's just exhausting.
Tech alone, as a solo performer, that alone, I really have to keep my immune system high, because tech is crazy. And you have to remind the director, you have to remind everyone that you're one person. And so the breaks can't be like your average breaks. You got to take more breaks. You're not Hercules. So they, and folks, it's hard to remember when lighting needs you, sound needs you. It's a lot. Tech is definitely the hardest.
Satanic.
Okay. On that note. Okay, Mo, this is a question for you just in terms of using text. How do you find your own voice in relationship to the found text? Because you want to stay true to who you are, but also to Sontag, right?
Wow, that's a good question, because I certainly am no Susan Sontag. You know, it was very daunting to take on this person who had such a very large public life, especially here in New York City, and again, a very rigorous intellectual life, even though she wasn't an academic per se. She was a freelancer. You know, I tried my best. What can I say, Joe? Because I really felt that gap, you know, of like this person who I'm not. And I guess another part of my impulse for trying to take journals, which are not spoken text, you know, they're not spoken language. This is literary, right? And speak those words. Why would somebody do that? It's hard, let me just say. If you're thinking about that, really think about it. Is that what she was talking about in those journals were these moments from her life. And by speaking the words and telling the stories, those moments live again in the theater, right? And that's the beautiful thing that we do in the theater, is we make these moments happen again and again and again. And so I think there was great pleasure in that for me, of just like, it was sort of like opening a photograph book and looking at an album of pictures from someone else's life, you know, not my own life. And she was a great writer, even when she was 14 years old. So she told those stories quite beautifully, even very painful ones. And so I just tried to be honest about those stories. I know that sounds totally cliched, but.
And did you, when you were initially looking at the text, was there a question for you in terms of, I am going to be channeling this through myself as the narrator, as we were talking about before in Dale's work, that, you know, the characters come, or I will become Sontag? I mean, it's like, you must have made a decision somewhere along the line in terms of how you approach the material?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I kind of cheat on it a little bit in my own mind, and I say I'm not playing Sontag. I'm playing her journals, you know, so that I am playing this text. You know, I'm not her. And what does this text give us tell us about her life, tell us about what she chose to record about her life, just a little snippet, but like as a text, like I'm playing the text. I'm not. So so in my acting, I'm not trying to be like some kind of emotion. I'm not trying to perform some sort of emotional realism for the most part. I'm stepped back a bit from what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right. It's not like Helen Mirren playing the Queen.
No,
Yes.
no, it's not. It's it's not Emily Dickinson. It's
Right. Right.
I love Emily Dickinson. Don't get me wrong.
What is a piece of advice you wish you had been given when you were starting out?
A piece of advice that I would listen to.
Yeah, that probably is the starting point.
Okay.
Or maybe a piece of advice that you would absolutely, completely ignore and just think was ridiculous also.
Well, I guess the general wisdom is that a career in the theater is just utter folly. So I feel like I got that information, but I did it anyway. So I disregarded that. I disregarded the odds and the accepted wisdom, Yeah, yeah, you're not going to be a rich person, probably.
And that also continues on to choosing to make a solo piece.
Right, moneymaker. No.
Exactly.
Although it does, it is portable, right? So there is some, there are economic considerations in terms of one person is, less costly than taking a huge company of people. But you still have to produce the show, you still need the lights and the sound and the auditorium and the ushers and, all of that. So theater is expensive.
I just put that out there.
I
'cause
would
it was
have
down here.
loved to have learned, and I still do. So if anyone has this advice, how can I balance my life? I don't feel, and that's okay, because if I'm placed on this earth to just tell stories, that's fine. But yeah, from a balance point of view, there's very little balance. There's a lot of weight on one end of the life, and then there's a lot of feathers. There's kind of like not a lot going on the other end of the life. So maybe that's something I'll learn, but I kind of damn the torpedoes full speed ahead towards one part of my life, and I just got to learn how to balance.
Well, I think it also feels end heavy as a solo performer and unbalanced because you're one person trying to do the work of 15 actors and a playwright or two, and there's no understudy, and so yeah, I don't really know the answer to that. I feel you.
Have you ever missed a show?
I have, because I lost my voice. Yeah.
I wish someone had, even now, right? I'm in the process of undoing the things that, some of the things that were said. I remember years ago, because I've had some kind of wacky acting teachers. And had I listened to, there's two of them specifically, had I listened to them, I had the sense not to listen to them, but they were very, very, it's dangerous when you're in that kind of position of power and somebody is looking to you to I guess, validate, which is, because no one can validate anybody as you get older, you learn that. But at the time when you're young and you're, looking to what's going on with me, in terms of being an actor and being in the arts, and because what art I think does, we realize that we're not alone. When you're listening to a piece of music or you watch someone on stage, I remember seeing say Al Pacino. I saw Al Pacino in The Basic Training of Pablo Hummel. That's one of the first plays I saw. And we were like, oh shit, he's from the Bronx like us too, and he did this thing and it's phenomenal and ... And then some of the stuff that I wanted to write, the ideas that I had Some of the things that I've written now, I had back then, and I remember teachers saying to me, "If you write this, you will alienate an audience. If you do this, you will. No one wants to see this what you've written." And some of the people that, for lack of a better term, have trained me, I still now, because I'm going to be 56 my next birthday, I have to undo what's been done. That tape is sometimes still there.
I have a question just in terms of actually putting a show together. When you generating the piece, because there's been some talk of music here, but also the pictures. I know a lot of you also are very specific about the music that are in your shows, and a lot of it is driven by specific musical genres that inform a whole sensibility and approach to the characters. All those elements, the musicality of the show, the score of it, the way a show looks, the lighting, the actual technical aspects of it. Do you feel that do you have a whole picture in your head as you're creating a show so that you come into the situation? Because we were talking about tech. Obviously tech, like any tech, obviously involves a million designers and directors. But I've always actually found that people who create their own shows are very aware of the three-dimensional space that they're existing in, because they can't get outside it as a playwright does and look inside, because you're always in it. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, what that is to sort of create the world that you're then in, that everyone literally has to create around you because you can't step out at that point. Music-wise, lighting-wise, pictures you want to make.
Well, I think for me, that is those things have to do with my trust in Marianne, the director, and in the incredible designers that I've worked with. And so I can have a big idea in my head about what I think something is going to be, and I can write a pretty little stage direction in italics in the script, and then each one of those minds takes that and explodes it in their own way. So it's something completely different than what I've seen here, right? And that's amazing. And it is weird to be inside this machine of theater and not be able to see it. And I just have to trust the people that are sitting where you all are sitting now at the tech tables and are making those decisions. And I do trust them, and I am very, very blessed to work with wonderful people in that way. And yeah, because I can't see it.
Yeah, and I also think sometimes we can't be too finite in what we think. Because what's in your head, what's on a page, and then when it hits the stage are two totally different things altogether. So one can't be too precious about their work that way, because no one can really crawl into your head and duplicate what's there. Because that's also when you find the challenge of what your flaws are as a writer and as an actor. Because I tend to overwrite, because I'll think, does this person get it? Do they get it? It's like, yeah, they get it.
I don't think I've ever approached any one of my shows with a feel or a look or even a general sound in mind. I just always was trying to stay true to the people, the characters, and trying to stay as clean as I could be and as complex as I could be with the emotions and the writing. It wasn't really until the director said, hey, I think you should, do this, or like the set designer, all of a sudden there was this set, and I was like, I don't even know what this is. I hope this looks good. It's just kind of weird. And then I realized, oh, this is something that I guess I have created, or that they interpreted this way as a designer. And you have to trust them. I mean, you don't have to. You can fire them, but but you're probably better off if you trust them most of the time, because you can't even see, I think, as a solo performer, the entirety of what it is that you've created. It's impossible for you to do that. I learned that way early on, which is why you need a director, and cannot direct your own solo show. It's impossible. I mean, it's possible, but it's crazy.
Do you ever videotape your rehearsals and then look at them? Or any of you? Do you?
No.
Hell no.
Do I? Well, there's with the Builders Association, there's a lot of video all over the place, so they're constantly videotaping what's going on. And I don't usually look at it, but sometimes I will. Like Marianne will say, well, come here and look at this thing, like, because I'm, acting my little head off and like something is going on behind me, some fantastic thing that I can't even see. And then I'll say, oh, if I look at it, then it makes sense because it's a synthesis of all of these elements. So only sporadically do I look at little moments, but no, not generally.
See, but also what you're doing though, which is good, when looking at it that way, you're looking at it as someone who's learning. Because like piggybacking on what Danny was saying, I think it's dangerous for certain people actually the majority of people to direct themselves because it really becomes egomaniacal. I've seen shows where, because the actor will start, one of the flaws of certain solo actors is that they start milking an audience. They'll start ad-libbing. I've seen shows that have been 1 hour 15, they've gone to like 2 hours and change, and it's just like, what the hell are you doing? And it becomes really indulgent, yeah? So I think very, very few people can actually do that. And so when you were looking at yourself on film, I think you were looking at what's up there, what needs to be worked on, versus, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't a vanity project, because that's the downside of the solo stuff where, people say, let me show you what I can do, and ... and it's just being extended. It's quite dangerous, so.
And you learn that you're a leader in your own right. So you're not just an actor walking on stage, ready for your tech, ready to perform. The entire theater, in a way, is looking to you. And so even from the person who opens the door to your costume lady, I mean, your energy you have to raise your vibration up, because depending on what your energy is, that can change what's going on backstage, what's going on front of house. I always try to make sure to learn everyone's name, how you doing, how's your kid, how's your dog, because I'm no longer just an actor on stage. This is a community affair. For me, I think. I know, everyone's looking at me, my actual body, but for me, I'm thinking that everyone is on stage with me in a way, and there is like this machine that is happening, and so I have to make sure that it's a well-oiled machine, and even if I'm not having a great day, they'll never know it. The oil is always pumping through that machine. Then I die afterwards.
Yeah, that's your responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. I have a number of questions here from audience members that are very much more oriented towards the business of solo work. So I'm just going to lay those questions on you. All right. Well, I guess the primary one is it possible to make a living from solo work? Answer as you will.
When I'm performing, yes.
Go ahead, please.
Are we answering it?
No, you go ahead. I didn't know if anyone was going to continue answering, so I was going to look at the next question, but please.
It's possible. I made a living doing it for many years. But it's challenging, and I think becoming more challenging, because part of the problem is that theaters see you as a cheap date. And for the most part, they don't want to pay you as a playwright, or they want to pay you a nominal fee as a playwright, and then a very nominal fee as an actor when you're doing the work of many, many actors. But yet, if you were that many actors doing the play, the cost of the talent would be way more than you're receiving. And that, I think, at a certain point becomes unsustainable for you as a person. So yes, but no.
Do you feel like the form is devalued, or just simply because it's one person, everyone feels like they're getting a bargain?
Yes,
Right.
and they seek to put you in a slot because you are cheaper than doing a play with an ensemble cast and a large set.
Right.
Not to say that all solo shows don't have large sets, but many of them are kind of more bare bones, so it's cheaper.
Got it.
They don't have to house as many actors, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. No, because they can fill a house with you guys, on stage in the same way they could fill it with a cast of a dozen. So, sometimes it seems like an easy choice, I'm sure. Is it challenging to promote and spread word on your shows? And I would imagine that depends on where you're performing it, right?
I can say I'm not the best person when it comes to spreading word, because I essentially want the work to speak for itself. And so I'm not big time hustler. I will let folks know on Facebook, my friends, but I don't continue. Once I start doing the show, for some reason, that publicity person within me, she steps back. She steps back. So I probably am not the best person when it comes to PR.
But also, again, if a piece, because my work tends to be somewhat dark, and like Forever, the last piece, got a lot of publicity. But to be honest with you, a lot of times the houses were not filled, because I guess it was the subject matter, whatever it is, that you also have to look at that too.
Because
in terms
you
of
think the publicity indicated that it was very dark and not for everyone?
Yeah, I think so. But in general, I think that's also, again, subject matter in terms of like an audience plays a role and stuff. Like a piece, whether it be solo or whether it be multi-character, let's say it's more music oriented, you're going to get, when you can, the stuff that's put to music, music does that in a weird sort of a way. Like, for instance, if you think of the movie or you think of the play Gigi, people love that music, right? But music can hide what that's about, because Gigi is about pedophilia. If you know the story of Colette, and you've got that lecherous old man singing "Thank God for Little Girls," but people think it's so cute, right? People see Louis Jordan and they see a very young Leslie Caron, and music you can get away with anything. But until it comes to like straight plays, a lot of times you can't get away with that kind of stuff. So, and again, like I said, my work is on the darker side, of things. So and to a certain degree, I'm a hard sell. I'm also aware of that as well. But having said that, also, what Danny was talking about in terms of but yet there are other people who do like it, and every once in a while you do feel like you are a cheap date, because I've had certain things that were much more commercial, and it did feel like, yeah, this date, I met you at 8 o'clock, we're done at 8:30, Yeah.
Well, that actually leads on to this very specific question about the length of solo shows. The question is there really an ideal length? When is it too short? When might it be too long? I don't know.
I think no more than an hour 30.
If it's good, I'll sit there for 3 hours, So I don't know.
Yeah?
Yes, if it's good, of course.
Have you ever come across one that's like 2 or 3
A
hours?
solo show that's 3 hours long?
So you had to think about that, didn't you?
Yes.
I feel like the second you feel like the person on stage is trying to tell you something, it's too long. That could be after a few minutes, in some cases.
Now, this is a question I'm not too sure, because it could be understood a couple of ways. What is the best way to begin? What is the best way to begin writing your one-person show? does that mean actually, I don't know who asked that, is that from the moment you face the blank page, or you mean in terms of actually the start of the show?
The process, like whether it's like getting up and doing improv or free writing off of a writing prompt or whatever.
That's stumped him.
I probably we all have different processes, and all of my solo pieces have been different. So in this next iteration, it is a piece about a lot of soul. So anytime I feel my soul, I'm like bah, but I cannot sit at a desk with paper and go, okay, it's time to write, because then all of my characters will be as flat as that piece of paper. So I want to be crying. I want to be walking around the house. I want to be sobbing. I want to be laughing. I want to feel. Anything I'm really feeling, that's going on the page. And then there's editing, which is a whole nother beast. But that's the process for me in this year when it comes to writing and creating.
Do you ever, but let me ask you this. You're the one that made that question, that wrote that question? Like, do you ever think that sometimes, you know what, let me just let it cook? Like you have the idea, and maybe you just need to just have the idea for a couple of days and just kind of do what you got to do? That's also a process of it too, you know. Where you don't, see, I think a lot of times when people sit down, they think they have to have the answer. Yeah? That it has to, you have to max it like right then and there. Because a lot of the times you may have the idea and you just need to have that idea and just kind of go about your business that day.
There is so much magic and inspiration to be had in the next 7 months, 8 months for you. God knows what tomorrow will bring, really. And maybe it's not that you just write it in a day. Maybe it's like bra, bra, dra, dra, dra. Then all of a sudden you have your piece.
I feel like some of my monologues within a play, I didn't really know what they were about until I actually looked at it on the page after having performed it many times. Or I didn't know what it was about until I was on stage at the 80th performance of workshopping it on the road. And then I was like, oh my God, now that I see what this is about, but it didn't occur to me. And then you go sit down and then you write something and then you try it again. So I don't think it's in stone, and it's definitely not the same process for everybody. But the structured improvisation is generally how I start most of my pieces. I know the place, I know the person, I know the scenario, I know who they're talking to, and then I just improvise and don't really write it. Although you could structurally improvise and write, which I think is what maybe playwrights do when they sit down. Just for me, that's not a very visceral process. So
We only have a few minutes left, so I have to ask this question because it's so great. Do you think it's all right to secretly tape someone, or a conversation short of bugging someone's apartment? I had to ask that. It's a great question.
No, you don't do that. No.
Yes, you do.
No.
I say fair game. I do. You change the details. You don't, make it so the person could be identified. But sometimes, like you were saying, somebody says something on the street and it just sings in your ear, And
That's different.
that is different.
no, it's not.
It's not. You won't be coming to my house, girl.
I'll just say iPhones are handy. I don't even have an iPhone. I'm just like totally, saying that. But I think like really record.
That was the question. That was the question.
Really record. I mean, I mentally record a conversation when sometimes, right? So I would consider that recording.
And on that note, I think that's an interesting note to finish on. Um,
Can I add something to that last, to your commission? And this is for everyone who feels like you have a commission or you've got a deadline. Here's what I want to say. When you perform or even just read your piece for the first time, can you please promise me to be careful who gives you feedback?
That's right.
Not every Tom, Dick, and Harry, A, knows how to write a solo piece, B, knows how to write, C, knows what you're after. It shouldn't be a whole kind of forum, let's shit on the solo piece. Yeah. Really, or even just let's love on it too, because that's a whole. Just be very careful with that. If you do have to have a talk back, let it be a talk back of a kind of Anne Bogart. What are these images? What are the images that came to your mind while you were watching or hearing? What in a week from now would you remember a sentence, an image, a character? Nothing about, well, I didn't understand this. Well, this didn't happen.
Well, what you need to do, what you should do.
Yeah.
Because when somebody prefaces it with that, even if you said to someone, you know, this is a work in progress. I can't tell you how many times I've said, this is a work in progress. Then next thing you know, well, this part I really didn't like. My response is, I don't give a shit what you like. Did you not hear what I just said? I just finished saying to you, now this is a work in progress. And also when people say stuff like what you need to do, what you should do, they're writing your piece for you. They're not honoring you as a person individually in terms of what, you know. It's a line I wish that I wrote. Poet that I love very much is Anne Sexton, yeah? And Anne Sexton was asked, why do you write the way you write? And her response was, I have the right to invade my own privacy. Don't you wish you wrote that? Someone who, again, like I said, are we on the same page? Do they understand like what I'm saying? It's like if I say, this character is, I mean, because a lot of times I use music. The question she asked me is, how do I know the director is right? It's like because I'll ask the director, what kind of music do you like? I'll say, this character is a mix. It's like Boo Radley meets Keith Richards solo on Stray Cat Blues. I know what you mean. I said, now we can work together. Because that's the kind of language that I use. So if that person gets it, right? But if I have to explain everything to you. And having said that, not every director is right for every piece. There's also that too, you find out, yeah?
Except for Joe Bonney.
Except for Joe Bonney.
Multicultural as I am. Do we have time for one more question? Okay. There's just one question that I noticed as I was going through these that seemed to be on many people's minds, and I guess there's a two-pronged approach to this curiosity. One is the how to start writing a piece and where that inspiration comes from, whether it's text or characters on the street or a story that wants to be told. But the other question that keeps popping up is, how do you find support for writing and then developing a piece and getting it out there? And I imagine that question is essentially about institutions or where you find perhaps institutional support. Because the concern seems to be how you support yourself as you're trying to develop a piece. Can you speak a little about where and how, perhaps at the beginning, because now you're also established, you know that I don't imagine that's an issue, but where you initially found the support to be able to write and develop work? Did you find that theaters were there for you in terms of, you know, grants, or did you, what was that first step for you in terms of finding the support that was then going to perhaps not just fund the writing process, but actually put up the show and get behind your work?
I feel like very lucky for some reason, but at the same time, I think there's a little bit of a trick there. I first got a Princess Grace Award. So I was able to write my third solo piece. And then my plan is always to perform the fuck out of my show. So perform it so much that there almost is no question. There is nothing that you have to explain to an organization. They've all seen it, so they know. They kind of want to give you money, really. So you're never having to say, "Oh my God," they know who you are. So so if you can
But
really
what if they
perform-
don't know who you
Yeah,
are?
what if they don't know who you, then perform the bejesus. I mean, try to get in these festivals. There's so many delicious festivals happening. Festivals, perform, so that you're not necessarily having to explain who you are. Your work is speaking for itself. So just it's kind of like stand-up in the beginning, where you just got to get on that stage, because you can't really explain in words what you're doing, so that's how it worked for me.
So essentially, really you have to make the work before someone is going to support you to make the work. Seems to me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Does that make sense to everyone?
And I do still have a day job, so yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for...
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, everyone.